everybody. My name is Heidi Bernasconi. I'm a science teacher in New York, and I was one of the teachers that worked with killer snails to develop Biodive. So, what I love about Biodive is that it truly was built around the next gen science standards and building this idea to have a three-dimensional lesson, right? So, what I'm going to talk to you guys about is just a brief introduction to all the different cross-cutting concepts and the science engineering practices that are included in Biodive. So you guys should be familiar with these, but these are your cross-cutting concepts, right? And then you have your science and engineering practices. And so my goal is just kind of just piecemeal a little bit, not the whole thing, but to just show you a little bit about how Biodive allows your students to be practicing some of these. So when you first start Biodive, or when your students first start Biodive, they are given what's called an anchoring phenomenon, and you watch this really cool video about this cone snail, right? And you'll see it before your students, do their experiences. But it's a hook. It's awesome. It's better if students don't know anything about cone snails going into it because they're going to have so many wonders and so many questions, right? And what happens with Biodive is there's two pieces to it. There's the virtual app that gives the students the actual experience. And then there's the journal where they log everything. They write their observations, they make their predictions, they build their models. And that journal truly is like the platform where teachers then can go in and get feedback. It's really cool. And so what's great about Biodive is that it's really student paced, and a student can go and rewatch something if they need to. And so when they're given this video and this phenomenon, they're immediately asked to write down 5 observations. So they're accountable for everything that they do within Biodive, but it allows them to get all those observations down right away as soon as they're done watching the phenomenon video. While they're watching the phenomenon video, what teachers can do is kind of guide students to help them figure out what cross-cutting concepts to kind of look for. Was there structure and function? Did you see a pattern? Was there any observation that you made on how the mouth opened, right, when the cone snail eats the fish? Spoiler alert. But it's really cool, and you can kind of help them a little bit throughout the way and get that nomenclature of the CCCs, working with your students. Throughout the Biodive experience in the journal, students are asked to make a lot of predictions, but what's really cool is they're also accountable for making observations outside the main task when they're in their VR experience. So like, for example, this particular question was a post question from a VR experience, kind of asking them, well, what else did you see? What other things did you see in the environment in terms of some abiotic factors, right? So like for this example, the water was really clear, because later in the experience, they're going to start to look at some human impacts that might not make the water clear, right? So they're going to see some disruptions in stability. Another great thing that is throughout the whole experience, it's just like one little example, is the process of energy entering ecosystems and how it's passed through ecosystems. So it really fits that energy and matter. You also see a lot of size and scale throughout the ecosystem. You also see a lot of food webs and energy pyramids, throughout. Some students are modeling, some they're doing a little bit of math, but each experience they're interacting with either the VR and then also the journal in itself. This is just like a little screenshot from inside the VR where students are asked to find animals at different trophic levels, and they're given this energy pyramid before they're then taught about energy pyramids. So it allows them to kind of discover who goes on what level. And then when you go into the experience in the journal, that kind of teaches you about the energy pyramid and how energy's passed. They kind of have that sense of who kind of lives where, which is also really cool. It's very interactive. One of the things that we really wanted to have is a disruption in stability with these different ecosystems or these different dive sites that they're going to go to. So in the journal, they're allowed to change certain biotic and abiotic factors, and they're going to see how that impacts biodiversity. And that's really important because one of the things that we teach in all of our classes how humans can impact the environment, both positively but also negatively. If we remove a trophic level, how does that impact other trophic levels within the same system? And so this is just one example of where they're able to kind of manipulate that and interact with that. And so modeling is a huge piece with the new next gen standards. And, we didn't want to leave that part out. And so digitally, they will start to build models. And the model for this particular experience is going to be a food web based off of what they learned of who eats who. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, okay, they're going to draw this and they're going to, who's kind of grading this? How do I know as they go through these experiences what their information is? How do I give them feedback as to whether or not their models or their answers are correct? And that's a really good question that you might have. The teachers have what's called a dashboard. And let me go back to my dashboard. And when I go to my dashboard for my class, you can see that Jessica completed the experience and Heidi has not, right? And so she's on step 4. So if I click on step 3, page 3, I can actually see her answers. And if I click here, I can see that she got a lot wrong, right? She just kind of randomly guessed here. She might have guessed a little bit here and put a little more thought, right? And then over here, she got the answer right. There's spots in each of these to give students feedback. So you would enter your feedback here, and that will go straight to that student, and they'll get a notification that they have this feedback from your teacher. So whether you're in the classroom with your students working on this, or whether you're doing this remotely through a distant learning platform, you're able to give students an experience that is as hands-on with real data as possible, where they're modeling, they're making connections, they're looking for patterns, making observations, analyzing data, but you can also gauge them and give them that feedback. You can also kind of see where they are in each of those phases, like who's finished, who's not, who needs, who's behind, right? So you can kind of track their progress and give them feedback throughout, which is really, really powerful. When we designed the 3 dive sites, there's 3 different dive locations. We looked up real data for those 3 specific areas. And so when they are collecting data later in the experience, where they're using tools and they are asked to collect the data and then make inferences about that data, they're going to interpret it, and they're going to engage in some argument, right, of what they think that data is saying. It's real data, and it's a great way to kind of pinpoint, the connection between what we're doing to the biodiversity. There's so many ways that you can take this experience and use it in middle school, use it in high school. You can amp it up at the AP level as well. It depends on what you do in between each of these, lessons or experiences that they're doing through Biodive. There's, like I said before, there's 2 different platforms. There's your journal, and then there's the VR app. And ultimately, it would be amazing for students to have a viewfinder and have the app on their phone and use them in your classroom with you live to ask questions. But ultimately, that's not a reality for everyone, especially for doing distant learning. And so Biodive has been equipped for distant learning by allowing them to experience that VR experience through a web browser. Ultimately, the experience is a little bit different, but they can still collect that data and make those observations in the VR, and then go back to their journal and give that data and give that feedback and make those patterns and write their observations. So it allows them to do this at home on multiple types of devices. So it really is a great resource for distant learning, especially if you are amped to incorporate the next gen science standards, have them build models. It's a great platform for teachers to give students feedback without even being in the room with them because of how that dashboard is set up. So enjoy, guys.